Right guys, so I'm going to do a quick video about my direct drive wheelbase settings on Automobilista 2, and I'm also going to highlight a new enough kind of piece of functionality that was recently added to Fanalab. So any Fanatec users out there are gonna love this. Now, what I'm going to cover here, right? Firstly, when we load up Fanalab, a lot of us will have car profiles in there. Now you'll notice that I've got a green car symbol beside a lot of these, right? I'll explain what that is in a minute, but let's park that there for now, and maybe let's have a look firstly at the settings that I use, right? So my default settings are here basically, right? So I run the wheelbase overall at 55%. I then run the natural damper at 15%. Now, what the natural damper does is, as you're doing kind of quick corrections left and right on the steering wheel, it acts to slow down the movement a little bit to kind of simulate what a real car is going to be like, whether suspension linkages, tires, ball joints, any rubber bushings and stuff like that. The next two then we have is the natural friction and the natural inertia. So the friction is what it says in the tin. It applies a constant friction to the wheel. Feels like the damper, right? But the damper, as I say, slows down fast movement. The quicker the movement, the more damping will apply. Almost like it will feel like the opposite direction to some degree. The natural friction is just a constant friction no matter what. No matter how quick you turn the wheel, how slowly you turn the wheel. The natural inertia then is if you turn the wheel really fast, it's how much the wheel wants to continue in that direction. So think of, let's say you're doing a bit of drifting or something like that, if you're into drifting, and you spin the wheel one direction as the car wants to, straighten itself up. Well, the steering wheel will want to continue to rotate in that direction. What else have we got here? We have the interpolation filter. So this is like the reconstruction filter for you SimuCube guys. What this does is it takes the raw FFB signal, right? So FFB in racing sims can be anything. That iRacing is like 60 hertz or 60 times per second. Stuff like Assetto Corsa Competizione and 4Factor and even AMS2, like they can all output in excess of 400 hertz. Some even higher, I believe, up towards 700 hertz and stuff like that. So multiples of the base iRacing FFB. Now you can get a plugin for that, but again, that's looking at physics and someone's take on physics, which can raise the FFB rate. So iRacers, I highly recommend you do something with the signal. Maybe use the IRFFB plugin or whatever. But anyway, going off topic. What that does anyway is, in between the points. Now we'll take iRacing as an example because that will be the most extreme, where you've only got 60 FFB updates per second coming to the steering wheel. Now depending on what speed you're doing in the car, you can cover a lot of ground in 1 second and you're only getting 60 updates. So if you're doing 300 kilometers per hour, let's say you might be getting an update to the FFB every 10 to 20 feet or wherever it might be. What that can do is that can cause kind of a unevenness in the force feedback signal. So think of a graph with ladder steps on it. What the interpolation will try to do is it will take those ladder steps and try and literally interpolate points in between them and reconstruct that FFB signal so that it's more smooth. The higher the number, the more smoothing that goes into it. Most modern simulators like AMS2, ACC, anything that's over 400 hertz, doesn't need this set to be really high unless you want additional smoothing. I leave mine at 1. If I was running iRacing, I'd have it at about 6, if not slightly higher. But I don't run that much anymore. So, but anyway, moving over then, we have the force effect intensity, right? So this is how much the intensity of the non-steering feedback. So everything like curbs, bumps, undulations in the track, how intense they actually are. And I turned mine down a little bit because, just like R Factor, AMS2 can be a little bit harsh sometimes. Not as bad as R Factor 2, mind you, but I run R Factor 2 FEI even less. But yeah, inside AMS2, I go into options and controls and force feedback, right? So I run the default profile. I have tried custom profiles, but really they're not for me. I think the default gives what a car should give, I believe. And what I mean by that, before people think I'm knocking the force feedback profiles or the custom ones, I'm not really. I'm honestly not. But for me, I like to feel the front and the back of the car, particularly more so the front though. I like to know what the front is doing and feel what the back is trying to do based off what the front tells me and based off of the how much the horizon moves on the screen and the sounds of the tires in my ear. And when I piece all of that together, the default profile speaks to most sense. It behaves in such a way that you'd expect a real car. I've tried some of the custom ones, and they definitely add a bit of feeling weight. They definitely add a bit of, bit of tightness to it. They do feel nice, but for me personally, when you're trying to drive a car on the very edge, I just think that they can often lack in some areas. But again, if you're using a custom profile and you're happy with it, by all means continue, because ultimately whatever you feel, if it makes sense to you, that's the most important thing. Outside of that, then I run the gain at 50 in Automobilista 2, and this coupled with a 55% or so setting in Fanalab usually gives me between 6 to maybe 11 newton meters of torque through the wheelbase, depending on what car I'm driving. I don't tend to go for really high torque figures like 15 newton meters and above and stuff like that, because ultimately the force feedback is one thing, but if you hit a curb and stuff, how curbs and so on interact with steering wheels and force feedback steering wheels is often not the same as real life, so you risk getting big major jolts, and ultimately you don't want the car driving you by having a too aggressive force feedback. Low force boost I leave off, being a direct drive wheelbase. If you're on some of the middle market wheelbases, I believe you could probably benefit from having that turned up. But again, if you're in a slow corner and you want a bit of extra weight, turn her up. Again, it's all about low force feedback force. I prefer just to have it authentic as it's given from the car's geometry. The FX slider is basically like an amplification of any effect, so think of curbs, road undulations, little bumps. And I run that just at a low figure just to give a bit of, that raw feel. I used to run that completely off, but I think it feels better with it on a little bit. Just adds to the overall experience, Damping I just leave at 50. That's pretty much, basic enough through how I run my force feedbacks. Now, one other thing I wanted to touch on as well was the ability for Fanalab to be able to capture a certain profile per car. Now you see when we have loaded up Automobilista 2, we've got this green tick beside the profile that's in use with Fanalab. Now, before, the way this worked was you'd create your profile, you'd go into a game, you'd load up a car, you'd select the profile you want, you'd click on load, and it would load the LED lights, the tuning menu settings, all of the stuff that relates to that particular profile that you've saved. What's happened now though with the latest version of Fanalab is they've actually managed to have games automatically detect what type of car you're driving. You tell the game what car you're driving. So let's test this out, right? So just because it's on screen, I'm going to jump into the M1 Pro car. Now I'm just selecting this in the background, so you're not going to see it on screen. But in a nutshell, what will happen is when I get to the track, you're going to see that profile automatically change beside the M1 Pro car. Literally, the Automobilista 2 is just loading in the background. And now the car is going to land on the track, and you'll see the Fanalab has reset itself, and if I scroll down, you'll see now the M1 Pro car has automatically been selected on the profile. And what that does is, this basically means that any FFB settings, any tuning menu settings, any LED profiles, you know, like for the shift lights on your Fanatec steering wheel, will load automatically. Now, what happens, I'm just going to exit out of the game here. What happens now if you want to, let's say, teach Fanalab to learn a new car? So for this, I'm going to take maybe the BMW 2002 Turbo. Yeah, so I'm going to jump into that car in-game. So let me just find a historic touring cars and BMW 2002, and let us kick that off. Now, I don't have a profile saved for this, I don't think, elsewhere, unless I've duplicated it, but this should load up, again, just with the setting that's already on there. And I'll show you how to kind of associate the BMW Turbo with the new profile. So you'll see now I've loaded on the BMW Turbo onto the track. This setting still hasn't changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load it artificially. So I'm going to load all of the stuff there. So just go ahead, click on load. And now what I want to do is I want to associate my BMW 2002 Turbo car on track with this profile. So I'll go up to click on the car symbol, and now you'll see add current car BMW 2002 Turbo to the profile. So Fanalab knows that I am in that car in Automobilista 2. And merely by clicking on this, there we go, click. Now if I scroll down to that BMW 2002 Turbo, you'll see now that we've got a green car symbol beside that profile on Fanalab. And every time you jump into the BMW Turbo car from now on, the profile for this car, both in terms of, you know, force feedback strength, damping, LED lights on the steering wheel, degrees rotate, whatever you have saved, will automatically load up for the car. So we'll leave that there, guys. That's a quick, I suppose, overview as to my force feedback settings and how Fanalab, or the new version of Fanalab, works, and works with not just Automobilista 2, by the way. This also works with ACC, Seto Corsa, and there's also an option on Fanalab, just when I clicked that little car symbol to find the car that I'm driving, it will also detect custom cars. So every car in every game will have a unique ID, and I'm putting on my corporate software hat here. So I you know, just to give a small background, like I work in software as a day-to-day job, and every car in a game is like a record in software that has a unique identifier number, and Fanalab is able to port itself across or over an API essentially to look inside of the program, look inside of the simulator, and find what exact car you're driving based off that identifier or based off that file name. So even if the car doesn't show on the list inside of Fanalab by default, you're able to tell Fanalab, hey, the car's not here, find what one it is exactly. Fanalab will return typically a car with a file name. The car should be in the file name, but if it's not, it doesn't really matter. And then just associate that with the profile. You'll get the same result. But yeah, thanks guys for watching. Hopefully this has helped and given a bit of information, and maybe you learned something that you didn't know. But yeah, until the next one, have a good one.